I remember that morning with cruel clarity, the kind of clarity that only comes when something inside you breaks for good. The sun was low, pale, and indifferent, spilling its light across the manicured lawns of our neighborhood as I turned onto Aliner Street. I hadn't called, I never did that sort of thing with her. Aliner Vance wasn't just my closest friend, she was the town's moral compass, a revered family court judge whose wisdom graced front-page features and charity galas. That morning, I'd baked her favorite lemon lavender scones, a recipe she'd always praised. God, how naive of me. I thought it would be a kindness to surprise her. Her Georgian colonial stood as a monument to tasteful authority, impeccable hedges, a freshly painted black door, a wreath of dried hydrangeas. It should have felt like a sanctuary, but my chest tightened before I even stopped the car. There, parked in her circular driveway, slightly obscured by her towering rhododendrons, was Robert's gray Lexus. My husband's. For a moment, my mind spun wild, flimsy excuses. A meeting about community board finances? A dropped-off document? But Robert, a partner at a respected architectural firm, never mentioned meetings at Aliner's home. A strange, icy stillness spread through me. I sat gripping the steering wheel, staring at that car until the chrome blurred. I got out slowly. The brick path to her sunroom was silent. I didn't know what I expected to hear, but as I neared the side window, always slightly ajar for her orchids, their voices drifted out. Not laughter, but a tense, low murmur. Aliner's voice, usually an instrument of calm deliberation, was frayed at the edges. Have to hold the line, Robert. If the truth about that night ever comes out, my reputation, the foundation, everything we've built for 20 years burns. My blood turned to slush. That night, then Robert's reply, grim and familiar. It was an accident, we covered it up, that's the secret, not us, that's what binds us. The ceramic plate of scones slipped from my hands. It shattered on the flagstones with a sound like a gunshot in the quiet morning. I didn't flinch. All I could hear was the roaring in my ears, the sound of my entire understanding of my life collapsing into a void. Inside, the voices stopped. A chair scraped. I took one step back, then another, my breath shallow. I fumbled for my car keys, my fingers numb. As I turned, I heard Robert's voice again, lower now, intimate in a way I hadn't heard in a decade. Just be calm. She trusts you implicitly, she always has. And Aliner's response, cold and clear, etched itself into my soul. She trusts us both, that's her weakness. I don't remember driving home. I must have, because hours later I found myself sitting at my own pristine kitchen island, still in my coat, the smell of burnt coffee and shattered dreams thick in the air. I stared at a framed photo on the counter. Me, Robert, and Aliner, arms linked, smiling after last year's charity auction. Her smile, once a symbol of steadfast friendship, now looked like a predator's grin. The betrayal wasn't a hot, passionate flame. It was a cold, engineered thing. It wasn't just my husband. It was my confidant, the town's saint, bound to him not by fleeting desire but by a hidden, terrible sin. A secret they'd built a fortress around, with me as the unwitting guard. At midnight, Robert came home. He kissed my forehead. He smelled of Aliner's distinctive perfume, jasmine, and old books. "Long day, my love?" he asked, his voice soft. "You seem distant?" "I'm fine," I said, my voice steady as stone while my heart battered my ribs. He nodded, poured a whiskey, and turned on the news. That night I lay awake beside him, listening to his untroubled breathing. The words echoed on a loop. It was an accident. We covered it up. She trusts us both. By dawn, the icy stillness had crystallized into something new. A silent, furious promise. They had built their world on a lie and my trust. They'd mistaken my kindness for blindness, my loyalty for stupidity. For the first time in my life, I was not afraid of the truth. I was afraid for them because I was now the only one who knew where the bodies were buried, and I had just started digging. But how do you destroy a monument like Aliner Vance when her lies are the very foundation your own life is built on? I was about to learn that the first rule of war is to know your enemy better than they know themselves, and I had just discovered mine was a complete stranger. The morning after, the house didn't feel like my home. It felt like a museum exhibit titled "A Life Built on Trust," every polished surface a mockery. Robert left early, murmuring about a site survey. I watched his Lexus disappear, that same gray ghost I'd seen at Aliner's. My reflection in the window was a pale, unfamiliar woman. Who was she, this wife who'd been so thoroughly fooled? When the door shut, the silence was deafening. It wasn't peaceful, it was accusatory. I poured coffee I couldn't taste and sat at the table where the three of us had shared countless meals. How many times had Alina reached across to squeeze my hand, offering wise counsel, while secretly sharing a hidden horrific history with my husband? The tears wouldn't come, instead a cold, surgical focus descended. I started to count, not sheep but lies. The business trips that coincided with Alina's judicial conferences. The late nights at the office when her chambers were just blocks away. The way he'd always defend her, Alina knows best, he'd say. God, she knew everything. My phone buzzed. A text from Alina herself, thinking of you, darling. Coffee this week, I need your sage advice on the gala menu. The audacity was breathtaking. It was a test, a probe wrapped in affection. I stared at it, my thumb hovering. The old me would have replied instantly with a heart. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked through my own house as if it were a crime scene. I stopped at Robert's study. The door was always locked. Client confidentiality, he'd say with a dismissive wave. I'd never questioned it. Trust, that was my weakness. That evening, Robert was tender, overly so. He brought me flowers, white lilies, Alina's favorite flower for her charity events. For my beautiful wife, he said, his eyes searching mine. You've seemed preoccupied. Just tired, I said, forcing a smile that felt like a crack in glass. The foundation fundraiser is a lot of work. I mentioned the charity we all volunteered for, the one Alina chaired. A micro-expression flickered in his eyes, not guilt but vigilance. Alina carries the weight of it, we just support her vision. The word hung in the air, a tiny grenade. He went to bed early. I waited until his breathing deepened into the rhythms of untroubled sleep. Then, I moved. The spare key to his study was where it had always been, hidden inside a hollowed-out book in the living room, a gift from Alina years ago. Irony, I thought, my hand steady as I slid it into the lock. The room smelled of him, sandalwood cologne and expensive paper. It was obsessively tidy. I started with the filing cabinet, my phone's camera ready. Contracts, project portfolios, nothing. Then the bottom drawer, locked, a small, fireproof box. It wasn't for blueprints. My hands were cold but calm. I riffled through his desk for the key, finding it taped beneath a drawer. Inside the box, no love letters, no photos. Instead, a thin file labeled Vance Foundation Riverside. My heart hammered against my ribs. I flipped it open. It wasn't financials. It was a series of old, scanned newspaper clips from 22 years ago. A local news brief. Local man dies in single-car accident on River Road. The victim, Michael Vance, Alina's first husband. A handwritten note in Robert's script was paperclipped to it. Witnesses unreliable. Roadwork signage confirmed missing. Case closed. No fault. Below it, a PDF of a private investigator's report, paid for by Robert, stating the brake lines on Michael Vance's car showed inconclusive but potential evidence of premature wear. The air left my lungs. It was an accident, we covered it up. This was the secret, not an affair born of passion but a pact forged in guilt. He hadn't just been her lover, he had been her accomplice. And I had been the perfect camouflage for them both, the devoted wife, the trusting friend, their alibi for a lifetime. I took photos of every page. The cold in my bones was now a glacial certainty. This wasn't about saving a marriage. It was about surviving the collapse of an entire fabricated world. Robert and Alina weren't just liars. They were architects, and they'd built their lives on a foundation of a man's death. I placed everything back with meticulous care. As I locked the study door, I looked down the dark hallway towards our bedroom. A new, terrifying question surfaced, chilling me more than any other. If they could cover up a death together, what would they do to protect their secret now? I had the truth, but it was a radioactive thing I couldn't yet hold. To use it, I needed to become someone they would never see coming, a ghost in the very machinery of their perfect lives. For 3 days, I performed a perfect pantomime of myself. I attended a Vance Foundation committee meeting, sitting across from Alina in her sun-drenched conservatory. She was magnanimous, commanding, her gaze occasionally lingering on me with a searching softness. "You're quiet, Audrey," she said, using the name only my closest friends used. "Everything all right?" I stirred my tea, the spoon not clinking. "Just admiring how you hold it all together, Alina. It's remarkable." The compliment, once genuine, now felt like laying a wire. She beamed, the picture of gracious strength. "It's all about the right foundation, my dear. and the right people holding the walls up. Her eyes flickered to the door as Robert entered late, bringing a draft of cold air and apologies. The way their glances connected, not with heat but with a deep, familiar alignment, confirmed everything. This was a partnership, a corporation of deception. At home, Robert was attentive. He brought me my favorite wine, asked about my book club. His concern was a surveillance system. I realized my grief had been expected. My calm was setting off alarms. I needed to give them a narrative they'd believe. So I invented a crisis. I called Alina, my voice carefully frayed. "It's my sister in Portland," I lied. "Her marriage is falling apart. She's a mess and I feel so helpless. It's shaking me." I let a sob catch, the sound of a woman preoccupied with someone else's disaster. The relief on the other end of the line was palpable. "Oh, my darling girl," Alina crooned, the judge replaced by the ministering friend. "Of course you're distracted. Family is everything. Don't you worry about a thing here." I could almost hear her telling Robert it's not us, it's her sister. The leash slackened. They stopped watching me with such intensity, believing my chaos was pointed elsewhere. With the space I'd bought, I began my real work. I couldn't go to a lawyer, not yet. The legal world in our county was a small village, and Alina was its queen. One whisper and she'd be tipped off. Instead, I went low-tech. I bought a cheap pay-as-you-go phone from a store 30 miles away. I created a new, anonymous email address at the public library. My first call was to an old college roommate, Simone, who now worked as an investigative journalist in a city 2 states over. We hadn't spoken in years, but some bonds are forged in pre-adulthood honesty. I called her from a park bench. "Simone, it's Audrey. I need background on a person, deep, quiet, and off the record. Can you point me to someone?" She heard the tremor I couldn't fully hide. "For you, anything. What's the name?" "Alina Vance." I gave her the basics: the judgeship, the foundation, her late husband Michael. "I need to know everything about that accident and any financial ties between her foundation and my husband's firm, Robert Sterling Architects." There was a long silence. "Audrey, are you safe?" "I will be," I said, and the certainty in my own voice surprised me. Next, I turned to the house. Robert handled all our finances, but I was the one who sorted the mail. I began photographing every bank statement, every credit card bill, every investment portfolio summary before filing them away. I found regular, sizable transfers from our joint account to a fund listed as SCF, Sterling Charitable Fund. The amounts matched donations I'd seen on the Vance Foundation's glossy annual reports, with Robert listed as a platinum patron. Our money, laundering his guilt into her public glory. One night while Robert slept, I accessed his desktop computer. His password was the date of our wedding anniversary, the ultimate insult. In his email, I found no romantic correspondence with Alina. Their communication was cleaner, colder: meeting requests, foundation board minutes, PDFs of architectural plans for the new Vance Foundation Community Center, plans his firm was doing pro bono. But in a subfolder labeled RV Project, I found scanned blueprints that made my blood run cold. They were for a property on River Road, the site of Michael Vance's accident. Plans signed by Robert for a small, elegant memorial gazebo commissioned privately by Alina 2 years after her husband's death. Never built. The cost estimate was astronomical, and a handwritten note in Robert's script read, "Atonement has no budget." I photographed it all. The puzzle pieces were locking together, forming a picture not of a love affair but of a symbiotic organism. His guilt, her power, their shared secret, all financed by the life we built. As I closed the computer, I felt no thrill of discovery, only a profound isolation. I was amassing an arsenal, but I was alone in a fortress of enemies. I looked at Robert, peaceful in sleep, and a terrible clarity dawned. I didn't need to prove an affair. I needed to prove the crime they'd buried. And to do that, I had to find the one thing they feared more than exposure, the witness they thought was gone. The past wasn't just buried, it was a landmine. To make them feel its tremor, I had to find the one person who saw the truth that night on River Road, the person whose silence they'd bought, or worse. The past is never a clean skeleton. It's a messy, living ghost, and it leaves traces. My search for the witness to Michael Vance's accident started in the only place I could think of, the digital graveyard of our local newspaper's archives. In the library, under the sterile glow of a microfilm reader, I found the full article about the accident. The brief, sanitized version I'd seen in Robert's file was a lie by omission. The original report was 2 paragraphs longer. It mentioned a possible witness, a road crew foreman named Leo Brandt, who reported seeing a second vehicle leaving the scene at a high rate of speed, but could not provide a make, model, or plate due to the heavy fog and poor lighting. In a follow-up piece a week later, the police stated the foreman had revised his statement, now believing the fleeing vehicle was likely an animal, possibly a deer, and the case was conclusively ruled an accident. Revised his statement? Those 3 words hummed with threat. Leo Brandt had seen something, and then he hadn't. Finding him was harder. He was a ghost. No social media, no listed number, but people are creatures of habit. Using Simone's journalist friend, I got a list of Brandt's last known addresses and places of employment. The trail went cold a decade ago. Then, I remembered the architectural plans for the memorial gazebo. The contractor listed was a now-defunct local firm. I dug through old community bulletins in our basement, the kind Robert never looked at. In one, I found a thank you note from the Vance Foundation, listing donors for a youth skills program. Among the names of wealthy patrons was Brandt and Son Construction in-kind services. A son. It took 2 more days of quiet, desperate searching through public records before I found him. Liam Brandt, licensed electrician, with a business address in a working-class town 40 minutes north. I drove there on a Tuesday, telling Robert I was visiting my fictional crumbling sister. Liam Brandt's shop was a garage attached to a modest house. A man in his late 30s, with tired eyes and grease under his nails, looked up from a workbench. "I'm looking for Leo Brandt," I said, my voice steady. His expression shuddered. "My father's been gone 5 years. What's this about?" I had prepared a story about a genealogy project, a long-lost connection to the Vance family. But looking at Liam's guarded face, the lies felt thin. So I took a reckless chance. I showed him a photo on my phone, not of the documents, but of Alina and Robert standing arms-linked at last year's foundation gala, smiling their perfect, powerful smiles. His face went pale. "You need to leave. I think your father saw something the night Michael Vance died," I pressed, my voice dropping. "I think he was persuaded to forget it. And I think the people who persuaded him ruined his life anyway." Liam stared at me, a war raging behind his eyes. Finally, he jerked his head toward the house. "Not here." Inside his kitchen, over untouched cups of coffee, the story spilled out. After the accident, his father Leo was harassed. First, by polite police detectives asking him to be certain. Then by a smooth-talking lawyer offering a consulting fee from the Vance family to help with his son's Liam's upcoming college costs, a fee contingent on his clarified statement. He took it, he revised. "But the money never came," Liam said bitterly. "Instead, Dad's small company started losing bids on city contracts. Inspections failed, rumors about shoddy work spread. The lawyer said it was unfortunate market conditions. Within 2 years, he was bankrupt. He drank himself to death. He always said they'd broken him twice, once for the truth, once for the lie." "Do you know what he really saw?" I asked, my heart a drum. Liam looked out the window. He never gave details. But the last year when the drink had him, he'd mutter about a gray car, not speeding away, he'd say, parked up the road, lights off. He said it was a fancy car. Out of place, a gray car. Robert had driven a gray sedan for years before the Lexus. Did he tell anyone else, the police? After he recanted, who would believe him? Liam looked at me, his gaze sharpening. "Why are you digging this up now? What's it to you?" I met his eyes. "They broke my life too, I just didn't know it until now." I left him my burner number, if you remember anything else. Anything at all. Driving home, the pieces fused into a terrifying whole. It wasn't a hit and run, it was a meeting. Michael Vance had driven to meet someone on River Road, someone in a gray car, an argument, a confrontation. An accident was arranged, and Alina and Robert together had systematically dismantled the only witness. This wasn't just a cover-up. It was a quiet, professional murder of the truth, and I was married to one of the killers. That night, Robert made his favorite lasagna. He was in a buoyant mood, talking about a new commission. "It feels like a fresh start," he said, raising his wine glass to me. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. I smiled, clinking his glass. "To new beginnings," I echoed, the words ash in my mouth. He had no idea that while he was sketching new foundations, I was quietly exhuming the rotten one his entire life, our entire life, was built upon. I had the witnesses' testament, the financial links, the blueprint of their guilt. But I needed something more. I needed the one thing that would make their perfect, polished world irrevocably crack. The original, unaltered police report Leo Brandt had signed. And I knew exactly who might have kept a copy out of a sense of duty or perhaps out of a long-held suspicion. The past had a keeper, and I had to find him before they realized their ghost wasn't just walking, it was digging. My next stop was the retired police captain who'd never been satisfied with the revised statement and who might still have the key to burying them both. Retired Captain Raymond Dwyer lived in a tidy brick bungalow on the south side of town, a world away from the manicured lanes of a Leaner's neighborhood. Finding him was easy, getting him to talk was the real mission. A man who'd spent 30 years on the force wouldn't appreciate a stranger knocking with questions about a cold case. I didn't knock. Instead, I became a fixture. For 3 mornings, I walked my neighbor's dog past his house at the same time he retrieved his newspaper. On the 4th morning, as he bent down, a gust of wind caught the paper, scattering sections across his lawn. I was there, helping him gather them before he could straighten. "Nasty wind," I said, handing him the sports section. He grunted, his eyes pale blue and sharply assessing, "Scan me. You're new on this route." "Just helping a friend, I'm Audrey." I used my real first name. With a man like him, authenticity was the only currency. "Dwyer," he said, taking the papers. He turned to go. "Captain Dwyer?" I asked, letting a note of respectful recognition color my voice. He paused, shoulder stiffening. "Retired. My father served under you years ago." "Paul Reese?" It was a gamble, a name I'd plucked from an old community patrol newsletter I'd found while searching for Brandt. A foot soldier long since moved away, just enough connection to be plausible, not enough to be easily verified. Dwyer's gaze softened a fraction. "Reese, good man, what can I do for you, Miss Reese?" "It's Sterling now. I'm in a bit of a bind. It's about an old case of yours, the Michael Vance accident." All softness vanished. His face became a slab of granite. "Case is closed, ruled an accident." "I know the official record," I said, keeping my voice low, conspiratorial. "But my father, before he passed, he mentioned it, said it never sat right with you. That the witness recantation smelled?" Dwyer stared at me for a long, silent moment. The sounds of the neighborhood, a distant lawnmower, a barking dog, felt suddenly muted. "Come inside," he said finally, his voice low. "And don't touch anything." His living room was a shrine to order, military-precise bookshelves, no dust. He didn't offer me a seat. "Why are you digging in this grave?" I met his eyes, dropping all pretense. "Because the people who built that grave are currently burying me in a different one. Eleanor Vance and my husband, Robert Sterling." His expression didn't change, but a muscle ticked in his jaw. "I see." Leo Brandt saw a gray car parked up the road, a fancy one. My husband drove a gray Mercedes at the time. Eleanor Vance's foundation has been funneling money through my husband's so-called charitable fund for years. "This isn't an affair, Captain, it's a partnership, and I think it started the night Michael Vance died." Dwyer walked to a locked cabinet by the fireplace. He produced a key, unlocked it, and pulled out a slim, faded case file. He didn't open it, just held its weight in his hands. I was pressured to close it, not overtly, a word from the mayor's office. A reminder of the Vance family's charitable contributions to the Police Widows Fund. The witness was compromised. Without him, there was nothing. "But you kept your own file." "I keep a ledger," he said simply. "Not everything that's official belongs in it." He opened the file, his movements reverent. Inside was a single, typewritten page, Leo Brandt's original, unsigned witness statement. It described the gray sedan in clear detail, including a partial plate that began with R.S. Roberts' vanity plate prefix for years. "R. Sterling?" Next to it was a memo, a copy of a bank transfer from a corporate account owned by Sterling Architects to a private account in Leo Brandt's name, dated 1 week after his revised statement. The amount was exactly the promised consulting fee. "He was paid," I whispered. "He was silenced," Dwyer corrected. "And then they destroyed him anyway, to be sure." He looked at me, his old cop's eyes seeing everything. "You know what you have here? A motive. They had a relationship. Vance found out. A confrontation on River Road. Something went wrong." They covered it up, bound themselves together in the cover-up, and have been profiting from their shared lie ever since. She gets a martyr husband for her saintly image, he gets a powerful ally and a clear conscience bought and paid for. He slid the file across the coffee table to me. It's not enough for a criminal court. Statute of limitations on anything but murder is long past, and you have no body, no murder weapon, just a dead man, a broken witness, and a ledger entry. I took the file, its weight immense. Then what is it enough for? A grim, satisfied smile touched his lips for the first time. It's enough to tear down a monument. Reputations are more fragile than bones, Miss Sterling. You show this to the right people, the Bar Association, the Foundation's major donors, the press, and their whole world, the one they built on this, crumbles into dust. He paused. But you need to be ready. They won't crumble quietly. I left his house, the file searing my hands through my bag. I had the ledger now, the incontrovertible proof of the original sin. As I drove, a strange duality took hold. Part of me was terrified of the war I was about to declare. The other part, the part that had been silently breaking for weeks, felt a fierce, unyielding resolve. I didn't go home. I went to a 24-hour copy shop and made 3 sets of copies. One for a safe deposit box I'd quietly opened the week before. One to mail to Simone the journalist with instructions to hold it. The third I kept. That night Robert was waiting up. "You've been gone a lot," he said, his voice casual, but his eyes were dark pools in the lamplight. "Trying to be a good sister," I said, the lie smooth now. Eleanor called. "She's worried about you?" He stepped closer, smelling of whiskey and Eleanor's jasmine perfume. "She thinks you're fragile, that maybe you're imagining things." The preemptive strike. They were positioning me as unstable. It was time. I didn't flinch. I looked right at him, and for the first time I didn't hide the coldness in my eyes. "Tell Eleanor she doesn't need to worry. My vision has never been clearer." He took a half step back, unnerved. The balance of power in the room had just imperceptibly shifted. He could sense it, even if he didn't understand it. The chessboard was set. I had the evidence. They had the reputation. But I held the one thing they'd forgotten I possessed. The truth and the terrifying patience of a woman with nothing left to lose. They thought they could paint me as a fragile, imagining woman. But I was done being a character in their narrative. Tomorrow, I would stop gathering proof and start using it. The first move would be a quiet one, a single, anonymous package that would start a crack in Eleanor Vance's flawless foundation. The crack began not with a roar, but with the soft thump of a padded envelope landing on a desk. I mailed it from 3 towns over first thing in the morning. Inside were copies of 3 things. Leo Brandt's original witness statement, the memo of the payment from Sterling Architects, and a printout of the pro bono architectural plans for the River Road gazebo. With Robert's signature and the note, "Atonement has no budget." The package was addressed to the chairman of the State Judicial Conduct Board, with a carbon copy to the senior partner at Edelman & Price, the law firm that handled the Vance Foundation's largest endowment. I chose them carefully, one entity bound by duty to investigate, the other bound by money to protect assets. They would work at cross purposes, creating chaos. Then I waited. I performed my life like a seasoned actor. I attended a Vance Foundation garden party, smiling as Eleanor held court, her laughter like polished silver. She caught my eye across the hydrangeas and gave a small, concerned frown, the look of a friend watching another stumble. I smiled back, serene, and took a delicate bite of a cucumber sandwich. The poison was in the post, not on the plate. The first ripple came 48 hours later. Robert came home tense, his jaw a hard line. He poured 2 fingers of scotch, his back to me. "Had a strange call today from old man Edelman," he said, his tone artificially light, "asking about some old speculative project files. Something about a due diligence review for the foundation." "That sounds tedious," I said, not looking up from my book. "It is." He turned, studying me. "You haven't spoken to anyone about my work, have you?" "Old projects?" I met his gaze, my expression one of mild curiosity. "Who would I speak to, Robert? I'm not even sure what you're working on now." He looked away, unsatisfied. The seed of doubt was planted. He was on the defensive, and he didn't even know where the attack was coming from. The next day, it was Eleanor's turn. She called me, her voice a melody of strange cheer. "Darling, a tiny nuisance. Some bureaucratic nonsense from the conduct board. They're reviewing old cases, can you believe it? Asking about Michael. As if that pain should ever be exhumed. Her voice caught a master class in performed grief. I may need Robert to clarify some timestamps on those old foundation plans he drafted. A formality. Of course, I said, my voice dripping with sympathy. It's awful that you have to relive it. Let me know if I can do anything. I already have, I thought. The crack was spreading. I saw it in the way they now communicated, terse, logistical phone calls replacing their previous warm familiarity. The shared secret was no longer a binding agent. It was a liability, and they were suddenly, silently auditing each other. I initiated phase 2. Using my burner phone, I sent a single text to Liam Brandt. The original statement has been submitted to the authorities. Your father's name is clear. I attached a redacted photo of the statement showing his father's honest words. His reply was almost immediate. What do you need? Nothing, I texted back. But if anyone official asks, tell the truth, the whole truth. I was putting pressure on the fracture from the inside. Robert and Alina were now caught between a formal inquiry and a witness who might finally talk. The climax of the week was the Foundation's quarterly board meeting. I was there as Robert's spouse, a decorative accessory. Alina presided with her usual grace, but it was brittle. When the financials were presented, a hawk-faced donor named Mrs. Gladwell pointed a bony finger at a line item. This Sterling Charitable Fund disbursement, it's doubled from last quarter. What specific initiative does this correlate to? Alina's smile didn't waver, but her eyes flicked to Robert for a microsecond. That's for the new community center architectural planning. Robert's firm is generously donating their time, but there are hard costs for materials and surveys. I see, Mrs. Gladwell said, her tone implying she saw far more. The air in the room thickened. The other board members, wealthy vultures sensitive to the scent of scandal, shifted in their seats. After the meeting, I watched from across the lobby as Alina cornered Robert near a potted palm. Her elegant facade was gone. Her words were hissed low and sharp. What is happening, Robert? First the lawyers, now the donors. This is a contained leak. Find it, plug it. He leaned in, his own composure fraying. Don't you think I'm trying? It's coming from the past, Alina. We need to be united. But the word united sounded like a threat. Their partnership was cracking under the strain, each beginning to see the other as the source of the poison. That night, Robert didn't come home. I knew where he was, at her house, doing damage control. The fortress walls were crumbling and they were huddled inside, blaming each other for the draft. I sat in my quiet living room, the house finally feeling like my own. The fear was gone, replaced by a calm, surgical focus. The anonymous package had done its work. It had forced their secret into the light of official scrutiny and donor suspicion. They were no longer hunting me, they were hunting a ghost in their own machine. But I wasn't done. A public, messy unraveling would still let them control the narrative, spin lies about my instability. To truly win, I needed their own voices to condemn them. I needed a confession, not from a witness, but from each other. And I knew exactly how to engineer it. I would offer one of them a lifeline and watch them choose to let the other drown. The trap was set, but the final snare required a lure. I would offer Robert a chance to save himself by throwing Alina to the wolves. I just had to make him believe it was his idea, and that I was still the trusting, fragile wife he could manipulate one last time. Robert returned home just after dawn, smelling of expensive whiskey and exhaustion. He moved through the kitchen like a ghost, pouring coffee with unsteady hands. The polished veneer was gone, replaced by the raw anxiety of a man who could feel the ground turning to quicksand. I was already there, dressed in a soft sweater, my face bare and deliberately vulnerable. I let him see the dark circles under my eyes that weren't entirely feigned. You were gone all night, I said, my voice a fragile thread. I was worried. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair, a gesture of genuine stress. Alina's situation is becoming a problem, legal headaches, nonsense, but it's consuming. I poured him a second cup, my hand trembling slightly. The performance was everything. It's all so awful, she must be terrified. I can't imagine to have your past picked apart like that. I let a tear well but not fall. It makes me think about our past, Robert, about us. If something threatened us, he looked at me, truly looked at me for the first time in weeks. He saw not a threat but a refuge, his worried, simple wife, the dynamic he understood. He reached out, patting my hand. Nothing will threaten us, Audrey, I'll handle it. But how? I whispered, leaning in, drawing him into a conspiracy of two. The lawyers, the board, it's all so powerful. What if Alina, in her panic, tries to blame you for something? To save herself? I planted the seed, drenched in wifely concern. His eyes darkened. The thought had clearly already occurred to him. She wouldn't dare, he said, but it lacked conviction. I just want you safe, I pressed, my voice breaking. After everything we've built, our life. I paused, letting the silence stretch. I feel like she's backed into a corner, Robert, and a cornered animal will lash out at whoever is closest. He flinched. The image did its work, cutting through the abstractions of scandal and making the threat feel personal, immediate. He saw himself as the target. He was silent for a long minute, sipping his coffee, his mind racing behind his tired eyes. I could see the calculation, his reputation, his firm, his comfortable life, all suddenly precarious because of a 20-year-old secret with a woman who was now a liability. What are you suggesting? He asked, his voice low. I don't know, I said, feigning helplessness. Maybe your lawyers could communicate that you're fully willing to provide any information about old foundation projects to clear your name. To show you have nothing to hide from anything? The implication was clear: create distance. Show you're cooperating. A slow, grim understanding dawned on his face. He wasn't seeing my plan, he was seeing his salvation. He squeezed my hand. You're right, I need to protect what's mine. Ours, I've been too loyal to a complicated friendship. He left for his study, a new, selfish purpose in his step. I knew what he would do. He would call his lawyer and begin the careful process of distancing himself, of reframing his involvement. The lifeline I'd offered was really a lever, and he was about to use it to pry himself free, no matter what it did to her. For that, I used the burner phone. A single text to Alina's private number. He's talking to the conduct board, cutting a deal to save his firm. He has the Brandt payment records and is prepared to explain them. I didn't wait for a reply. I destroyed the SIM card. The reaction was not quiet. Within 2 hours, Robert's phone erupted. He took the call in his study, his voice rising in panicked denial. Alina, calm down. That's not who told you that. It's a lie. What do you mean? I'm throwing you to the wolves? You're the one who... But the trust was shattered. She believed the anonymous warning because it confirmed her deepest fear that in the end he would save himself. The war was now out in the open. Between them, and I had handed each of them the match to burn the other's bridge. The final piece came that evening. My son Mark called. He sounded strained. Mom, what the hell is going on? I just got a call from Aunt Alina. She was hysterical, rambling about Dad betraying her, about you being unstable, about some old accident. She asked me to reason with you both. My heart ached for him, caught in the crossfire, but this was necessary. Mark, listen to me. Something very wrong happened a long time ago. Your father and Alina have been hiding it. I found out. Now they're turning on each other. I need you to trust me and to stay out of it, please. There was a long silence. Is Dad in legal trouble? Yes, I said, the truth a clean, sharp thing. But he brought it on himself. This isn't my doing, it's the consequence of his. After I hung up, I felt a profound stillness. The chaos was now self-sustaining. Robert and Alina were locked in a reciprocal destruction, each move against the other deepening the rift. I was no longer the protagonist in their drama, I was the stage manager watching the final act play out. I had my confession. Not in words, but in actions. His move to distance himself was an admission of guilt. Her frantic attack on him was an admission of conspiracy. The outside pressures were now amplifying their conflict, feeding on the chaos. I looked at the family photo on the mantel, the 3 smiling faces. It was already a relic. The gilded cage was lying in pieces around me, and for the first time I could see the open sky. The final step was no longer about strategy. It was about timing. I had to choose the exact moment to step forward, not as a vengeful wife, but as the wounded party finally speaking her truth, with a mountain of evidence and 2 enemies already destroying each other. The world was about to hear their story, not from me but from the echoes of their own war. Rehook. The private war was raging, a duel fought with the very weapons they'd forged together. But the public explosion was coming. I had one last visit to make, not to an enemy but to a friend with a press pass. It was time to give the world the story and let the truth finally perform its final, clarifying cut. The air the next morning tasted of ozone, the calm before the public storm. I drove to the city to meet Simone at a bland, corporate chain hotel far from anyone who might recognize us. She was already in a corner booth, two untouched coffees between us. "You look like hell," she said by way of greeting, but her eyes were sharp with concern. "I feel like a demolition expert," I replied, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "This is the trigger." Inside was the curated story. Not a messy emotional tale of a betrayed wife, but a cold, factual dossier. The timeline of Michael Vance's accident, Leo Brandt's original and revised statements side by side, the bank transfer from Sterling Architects, the memo about atonement, the recent board meeting financials, and documented proof of the concurrent judicial and donor inquiries. It painted a picture not of an affair, but of a financial and ethical conspiracy between a judge and an architect to obstruct justice and misuse charitable funds. I was a footnote. The spouse who uncovered the discrepancies? Simone scanned it, her journalist's mind clicking through the implications. This isn't a gossip column piece. This is front page, follow the money, career-ending stuff for both of them. She looked up. "You're sure they're already ending each other's careers?" I said calmly. "I'm just providing the public record and the quotes." I handed her a thumb drive. "Audio files from our home security system. Picked up their argument in the foyer last night." I'd activated the system remotely. On it, Robert's hissed, "You're the one who panicked and paid him off." And Aliner's icy, "With your firm's money, Robert, your signature." "We sync together?" Simone let out a low whistle. "You've been busy." She leaned forward. "What's your condition? Do you want anonymity?" "No," I said. "Use my name, Audrey Sterling. I'm not a source, I'm the complainant. But the story is the evidence, not me. It runs tomorrow." She nodded, understanding. By making myself part of the story, I controlled the narrative from inside it. I would be the brave whistleblower, not the scorned woman. It was armor. The drive home was surreal. I was handing the match to the pyre I'd spent weeks building. When I walked in, Robert was on the phone, his back to me, voice a strained chord. "I don't care what she told you, it's a fabrication." "She's trying to, yes, I'll issue a statement." He hung up and turned. The man before me was a stranger, pale, vibrating with a desperate rage. "What did you do?" he seethed. "I had coffee with a friend," I said, placing my bag on the table with deliberate calm. "Don't lie to me," he shouted, the sound foreign in our quiet house. "The board is in emergency session. Aliner's lawyer just called mine, accusing me of leaking financial documents. The only person who could have—" He stopped, his eyes widening with a horror that was almost beautiful. "You, it was you, the copies, the inquiries. All of it, I didn't deny it. I simply looked at him, my silence the final confession." The rage drained from his face, replaced by a bewildered, almost childish hurt. "Why, I'm your husband. We could have, I was fixing it." "You were fixing yourself," I said, my voice quiet and terribly clear. "You and Aliner built a life on a lie. You made me the foundation of that lie. I'm just removing my support." He stumbled back as if struck. The understanding that I knew, truly knew, not about an affair but about the accident, the cover-up, the rotten core, finally dawned. He saw not his gentle wife but a witness, a judge. "You'll destroy everything," he whispered. "No," I corrected. "You already did, I'm just clearing the rubble." He left then, slamming the door so hard the framed photos on the wall shook. I didn't watch him go. I went to the window I'd stood at so many mornings, waiting for a life that was a fiction to begin again. This time I was waiting for nothing. I was waiting for the end. It came at 6 a.m. the next morning. Simone's article was the lead story online. Beneath the gilded fountain, judge, architect, and a 20-year-old cover-up. It was brutal, meticulous, and everywhere. By 7 a.m., my phone began to ring, reporters, numbers I didn't know. I sent one brief, pre-written statement from my email. "I commend the press for seeking the truth. My focus is on cooperating fully with all official inquiries." Then I turned it off. I watched the fallout on the muted television. News vans surrounded Aliner's majestic colonial. A clip showed her face a mask of stern dignity, leaving for the courthouse, refusing comment. A ticker at the bottom read, "Judicial Conduct Board recommends suspension pending full investigation." Another clip showed Robert outside his firm, flanked by lawyers. his statement about full cooperation swallowed by shouted questions about hush money and obstruction. Their worlds, so carefully constructed, imploded in real time. It was not a single explosion but a series of collapsing structures, the foundation's major donors publicly withdrawing, the architectural firm announcing Robert's administrative leave, the Bar Association opening its own probe. The chaos was public, total, and irrevocable, and I was at the quiet center of it. My son called, his voice thick with shock. "Mom, the article, is it true?" "Every word," I said. He was silent for a long time. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be," I said and meant it. "Be glad the truth is out." I spent that day in profound silence. The house was finally completely mine. The ghosts were exorcised by the glaring light of the front page. There was no triumph, only a vast and echoing quiet. The battle was over. The war was won not with a scream, but with a story told in black and white. But victories have casualties. And as the sun set, casting long shadows over the ruins of two lives, I knew the final reckoning wasn't with them. It was with the woman I had become. The demolition was complete. Now I had to walk out of the dust and decide what to build in the silence. The public ruin was absolute, but the private wreckage was mine to sort through alone. With the world watching and the dust settling, I faced the most daunting question of all. Who was Audrey Sterling now that the lie she'd lived was gone? A year is a lifetime and also a blink. The world moved on as it always does to newer, shinier scandals. But the seismic shift in my small world left permanent contours on the landscape. Robert and Alina's ruin was thorough, professional, and quiet. The Judicial Conduct Board forced Alina's early retirement, her reputation irredeemably tarnished. The Vance Foundation was dissolved, its assets distributed to other charities under court supervision. Robert settled a litany of civil suits from donors and the state, surrendering his architectural license to avoid criminal charges related to financial malfeasance and obstruction. He lives in a rented condominium now, a gray man in a gray building. We are divorced. The decree was a single sheet of paper, the final period on a long, fraudulent sentence. I sold the house, the museum of my old life. The proceeds after the settlement were substantial. I didn't buy another monument. I bought a small, weather-salted cottage on a bluff overlooking the sea. It has a garden, a desk by a window facing the water, and silence that speaks in waves and wind. My son, Mark, needed time. The revelation that his father and his honorary aunt were not just adulterers but conspirators in a cover-up was a different kind of betrayal. We've begun talking again, carefully. Our relationship is being rebuilt on a new, honest foundation, one that acknowledges the broken past without letting it define the future. He is living his life as I asked him to, better than we did. I never saw Alina again. I heard she moved to be near a sister in another state. A friend of a friend said she spends her days painting seascapes. Ironically, I don't wish her ill. I simply wish her gone from my story, and she is. The greatest surprise was the loneliness. Not the aching loneliness of a bad marriage, but the vast, clean loneliness of absolute freedom. It was terrifying, and then it was everything. I filled it slowly on my own terms. Elaine, my old friend, convinced me to start writing, not a memoir but a blog. I called it The Quiet Table. It began as a cooking blog, recipes for one, meals that didn't require a celebration, but my words kept drifting. I wrote about the solace of kneading dough, the metaphor of a well-stocked pantry, the courage it takes to set a single place at a table and call it enough. Strangers found it. Women wrote to me. They didn't know my past, but they recognized the landscape of quiet reclamation. "You make being alone sound like a choice, not a sentence," one message read. They became my community, my silent sisters. In speaking to them, I healed myself. One evening, I walked the beach at low tide, the damp sand firm under my feet. In my pocket was the last relic, the spare key to Robert's old study. I held it in my palm, its silver gone dull. It represented every locked door, every withheld truth, every assumed permission I'd never granted. I drew my arm back and threw it into the advancing surf. It vanished without a sound, swallowed by the immense, forgiving indifference of the sea. It was not an act of anger, but of completion. I am not the woman who baked scones for a friend, nor the wife who stared at a gray car in a driveway. I am not even the avenger who meticulously orchestrated a downfall. I am someone else, someone forged in the collapse of all those other versions. I am a woman who wakes to the sound of gulls, not a racing heart. Who finds joy in the steam from a single cup of tea in the first shoot in the garden in a sentence that comes out right. The peace I have is not the absence of noise, but the presence of a self that no longer needs to scream to be heard. The other day, a letter arrived from Robert's lawyer. Final paperwork. I signed without emotion and walked to the post office in town. On the way back, I stopped at the local market. The young cashier, a girl with kind eyes, smiled at me. Beautiful day, isn't it? I looked past her through the door to the slice of glittering ocean visible between the buildings. The sun was high, the light pure and uncomplicated. Yes, I said, and my smile was my own, uncalculated true. It really is. I walked home, the salt air on my skin. The cottage awaited, its door unlocked. Inside, my desk by the window held a half-written post for the quiet table. The opening line read, "There is a strength that comes not from weathering the storm, but from learning to dance in the rain alone." I sat down, the old, familiar weight of purpose settling around me, but this time it was a cloak I had woven for myself. The story that began with a betrayal on a crisp morning ended here, in the gentle roar of the tide and the quiet click of a keyboard. I had not just survived them, I had outlived the very need for them. And as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in colors of fire and rose, I realized the most profound victory of all. The silence was no longer something I endured. It was a melody I had finally learned to hear, and it was mine. Final note, this concludes the story. Thank you for listening. From my quiet table by the sea, I wish you peace and the unwavering strength of your own truth. Audrey.